The senator's daughter told Judge Caprio he couldn't touch her because of her father's position. 30 minutes later, she was being dragged from the courtroom in handcuffs, screaming about immunity she didn't have. Victoria Romano, 22 years old, daughter of Senator Anthony Romano, walked into Providence Municipal Court like she owned the entire judicial system. Her $4,000 Hermes bag bounced against her hip with each confident step. Her Cartier diamond bracelet caught the fluorescent lights as she waved dismissively at court staff. Her designer heels clicked against marble floors with the rhythm of someone who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. If you believe political connections shouldn't protect criminals from consequences, subscribe now. This channel fights for justice that treats everyone equally. Following reluctantly behind Victoria was Thomas Whitman, one of New England's most expensive defense attorneys, a man whose usual confidence appeared completely shaken. He kept checking his Rolex, whispering urgent instructions that Victoria completely ignored. You could see the concern on his face, the understanding that this case was spiraling beyond his control. But what nobody in that courtroom knew yet was just how badly Victoria's arrogance would destroy her, how her sense of entitlement would turn a DUI case into federal investigation territory, how her own words would put her in handcuffs before the hearing ended. Thursday morning, 10:30 a.m., the bailiff announced the charges. The state of Rhode Island versus Victoria Ann Romano. Charges: driving under the influence, destruction of government property, resisting arrest, threatening law enforcement officers. Victoria sauntered to the defendant's table with the confidence of someone attending a charity gala where she was the guest of honor. She didn't acknowledge Judge Caprio, didn't acknowledge court staff, didn't even acknowledge her own attorney. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began taking selfies in the courtroom. Imagine watching someone so disconnected from reality that they treat criminal charges like a photo opportunity. You would have felt the disbelief, the anger, the desperate need for someone to finally hold her accountable. Judge Caprio looked up from his papers with characteristic dignity and patience. "Good morning, Miss Romano." Victoria didn't respond, too busy adjusting her phone angle to capture the perfect courtroom selfie for Instagram. "Miss Romano, I'm speaking to you." Victoria glanced up with obvious irritation, as if Judge Caprio had rudely interrupted something important. "Oh, hi. Sorry. I was just documenting this whole circus for my followers. They find government incompetence really entertaining." She waved her phone toward the judge. "You don't mind if I livestream this, do you? My audience loves behind-the-scenes content from their tax dollars at work." The courtroom tensed, the casual disrespect, the assumption that criminal proceedings were entertainment, the complete lack of understanding about the gravity of her situation. Judge Caprio's voice became firm but controlled. "Miss Romano, you're in a court of law facing serious criminal charges. Please put your phone away and show proper respect for these proceedings." Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically, slid her phone into her purse with theatrical reluctance. "Fine, but this better be quick. I have a spa appointment at noon, and they don't reschedule for government employees." Listen carefully to what happened next, because Victoria's dismissal of court proceedings as inferior to her beauty routine would be the first of many mistakes that would cost her everything. Judge Caprio studied the police report. "Miss Romano, according to Officers Martinez and Johnson, you were driving under the influence when you crashed into a police cruiser at 55 miles per hour. Victoria's response showed zero accountability. "Your Honor, I wasn't drunk. I had maybe 2 cocktails at a charity event. I was completely in control when this unfortunate accident occurred." "Miss Romano, you refused to take a breathalyzer test." Victoria's sense of entitlement exploded into view. "Your Honor, I don't submit to roadside testing by local officers. My family has diplomatic status through my father's Senate position. You could hear the courtroom react. Gasps, whispers, the sheer audacity of claiming diplomatic immunity, the complete misunderstanding of how American law actually works. Judge Caprio's voice became more pointed. Miss Romano, senators' family members don't have diplomatic immunity. Victoria looked genuinely shocked. Your Honor, that can't be right. My father sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He literally writes the laws. We absolutely have special status. The assumption that writing laws meant being above laws, the belief that political power equaled legal immunity, the complete disconnect from reality. Miss Romano, when Officer Martinez attempted to arrest you, you stated, "You can't touch me. I'm Senator Romano's daughter." Explain that statement. Victoria's response revealed her complete inability to understand equal treatment. Your Honor, I was simply explaining the legal reality. Local police don't have jurisdiction over Senate families. It's not personal. It's just how the system works. You believe local police can't arrest senators' children? Victoria nodded with alarming confidence. Absolutely, Your Honor. Federal officials and their families are protected from local harassment. It's called separation of powers. Nobody was prepared for what Judge Caprio discovered next, because Victoria's misunderstanding of constitutional law was about to become the least of her problems. The judge's voice became sharper. Miss Romano, you threatened the officers' jobs because they were doing their job? Victoria waved dismissively. Your Honor, I wasn't threatening anyone. I was educating them about government hierarchy. Sometimes local officers need reminders about chain of command. The arrogance of treating police officers like personal servants left the courtroom stunned. The assumption that badge and gun meant nothing compared to Daddy's Senate seat. The complete lack of respect for public service. Judge Caprio continued reading. Miss Romano, you told Officer Johnson, I have diplomatic immunity. Do you understand what diplomatic immunity actually means? Victoria's ignorance shone through. Your Honor, diplomatic immunity means government officials and their families can't be arrested by people who rank below them. It's basic civics. Miss Romano, diplomatic immunity applies only to accredited foreign diplomats. It has nothing to do with senators. Victoria looked confused and annoyed. Your Honor, that doesn't sound right. My father has immunity from prosecution. That protection extends to family members. Think about the privilege required to believe you're literally above the law, to assume that birth and connections exempt you from consequences, to treat police officers like servants who exist to recognize your superiority. Judge Caprio studied the case file more carefully. Miss Romano, when you crashed into the police cruiser, what was your immediate concern? Victoria's answer revealed complete lack of empathy. Your Honor, my immediate concern was that this incident might be photographed or recorded and damage my social media presence. I work very hard to maintain my personal brand. You weren't concerned about potential injuries or property damage. Victoria shrugged with infuriating nonchalance. Your Honor, nobody was hurt, and the car damage is covered by government insurance. These situations get resolved through proper channels without involving local courts. The complete absence of remorse, the assumption that government insurance made destruction okay, the inability to understand that crashing into a police car at 55 miles per hour could have killed someone. Miss Romano, you destroyed a police cruiser that serves the public safety of this community. Victoria's disconnection from public service was absolute. Your Honor, police departments have vehicle budgets for exactly these situations. They'll get a newer car out of this, so if anything, I did them a favor by helping them upgrade their fleet. Your subscription literally determines if stories like this reach people who need to see entitled criminals face justice. Hit subscribe and notification bell right now. We're building an army against privilege abuse. This was the moment Victoria made her most catastrophic mistake. Instead of showing any remorse or respect, she decided to assert her privilege directly. Your Honor, I appreciate that you have a job to do, but I think we both know this case is going to be resolved through appropriate federal channels. My father's office is already handling this situation diplomatically. Judge Caprio's voice became deadly quiet. Miss Romano, explain what you mean by appropriate federal channels. Victoria leaned forward with growing confidence, apparently believing she was about to end this proceeding with superior legal knowledge. Your Honor, Senator Romano's office has contacted the Department of Justice regarding this local overreach. Federal prosecutors will handle this matter if any charges are warranted, which they're not. The silence that followed lasted 17 seconds. Everyone in that courtroom understood what Victoria had just admitted. Everyone except Victoria herself. Judge Caprio's expression hardened. Miss Romano, are you telling this court that your father is intervening in your criminal case? Victoria nodded enthusiastically, apparently not understanding the implications. Exactly, Your Honor. That's how these situations work. Local courts don't have jurisdiction over federal officials' families when they're traveling on government business. You were on government business at 2 a.m. on Saturday? Victoria's ability to rationalize anything was impressive. Your Honor, I was returning from a charity event for underprivileged children. Representing my father at community events is part of my unofficial duties as a senator's daughter. Judge Caprio had heard enough. Now came the moment that would shatter Victoria's delusions forever. Miss Romano, you've just told this court that you believe senators' children are above local law, that police officers work for your family, and that your father is intervening to stop these proceedings. Victoria straightened with supreme confidence, apparently believing she'd successfully established her legal superiority. You could see it in her posture, the smugness, the certainty that money and connections would save her like they always had. Judge Caprio's voice became devastatingly calm. Let me explain something about American law that you apparently missed in your political science classes. Victoria listened with the smugness of someone expecting validation. No one is above the law. Not senators. Not their children. Not anyone. Your father's position doesn't grant you immunity. Your family's wealth doesn't excuse criminal behavior. And your last name doesn't make you special. Victoria's confident expression began cracking for the first time, the reality starting to penetrate, the understanding that maybe, just maybe, she'd miscalculated. Miss Romano, you drove drunk and destroyed public property. You threatened police officers for doing their jobs. You claimed immunity you don't possess and authority you don't have. Judge Caprio's voice gained power with each word. Most seriously, you've just admitted that your father is attempting to interfere with judicial proceedings. That's not just inappropriate. It's potentially criminal. Victoria's face went pale. You could see the fear finally breaking through the arrogance, the realization that her own words had created a disaster. Bailiff, contact the FBI's Public Integrity Section immediately. We have a potential case of federal obstruction of justice that needs immediate investigation. Victoria's eyes widened in horror. Your Honor, wait. I didn't mean that my father was actually interfering. I just meant that his office explains these situations to local authorities when there are misunderstandings. Judge Caprio cut her off mercilessly. Miss Romano, you specifically stated that your father's office contacted the Department of Justice to handle this case. That's either the truth, which requires investigation, or it's a lie, which is perjury. Victoria started panicking for the first time, the confidence completely gone, replaced by genuine terror. Your Honor, I might have misspoken. I was just trying to explain how these situations usually get resolved. Usually suggests this isn't your first time using your father's position to avoid consequences. Imagine watching privilege collapse in real time, watching someone realize that the safety net they'd relied on their entire life was actually a trap they'd built with their own arrogance. Judge Caprio turned to the prosecutor. "Counselor, please prepare additional charges for attempted obstruction of justice and making false statements to intimidate law enforcement." Victoria's attorney finally spoke up. "Your Honor, my client is young and, Counselor, your client is 22 years old and just confessed to federal crimes in open court." The devastation in Victoria's eyes, the complete breakdown of her worldview, the understanding that Daddy's Senate seat couldn't save her from her own words. Judge Caprio's voice became more pointed. "Miss Romano, for driving under the influence and destroying government property, I sentence you to 90 days in county jail, $5,000 fine, and 2-year license suspension." Victoria barely comprehended the sentence as reality crashed down around her. For threatening law enforcement officers and claiming false immunity, an additional 30 days and $2,000 fine. Victoria's voice cracked for the first time, real emotion breaking through. "Your Honor, this is way too harsh for a traffic incident. Miss Romano, this isn't a traffic incident. This is criminal behavior combined with abuse of political position." Judge Caprio's voice became relentless. "For attempting to obstruct justice through false claims of federal intervention, I'm holding you in contempt of court. Bailiff, take Miss Romano into custody immediately." Victoria stood up in shock and disbelief. "Your Honor, you can't do this. I'm Senator Romano's daughter. You can't touch me." Those words, "You can't touch me," they sealed her fate completely. The final proof that she'd learned nothing, that the privilege ran so deep that even facing jail time, she still believed herself untouchable. Judge Caprio's final response was devastating. "Miss Romano, watch me." The bailiff approached with handcuffs. Victoria backed away, still refusing to believe this was happening, still convinced that someone would stop this, that her father would burst through the doors, that her connections would save her. "This is illegal. My father will have your job. You can't arrest me." "Miss Romano, you're under arrest for contempt of court. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." The handcuffs clicked around her wrists, cold metal against expensive jewelry, the physical manifestation of consequences she'd never faced before. Victoria finally understood that her family name wouldn't save her. "I want to call my father. I want to call him right now." Judge Caprio's response was final. "Miss Romano, after we investigate your claims about his involvement, your father might need his own attorney." Victoria was dragged from the courtroom in handcuffs, screaming about immunity she didn't have, crying about connections that couldn't help her. The designer heels that had clicked so confidently now stumbled and caught on the marble floor. You could hear her voice echoing down the hallway, the breakdown of someone whose entire worldview had been built on privilege and arrogance, the collapse of a belief system that said rules were for other people. Outside the courthouse, news crews captured footage of Senator Romano's daughter being led to a police transport vehicle in shackles. The perfect courtroom selfie she'd wanted earlier, replaced by the most humiliating moment of her life, broadcast to millions. Within hours, Senator Anthony Romano held a press conference. His face showed a mixture of shame, anger, and disappointment. He denounced his daughter's behavior, confirmed that his office never contacted the Department of Justice about her case, stated that Victoria would face consequences like any other citizen. That political position wouldn't protect her from accountability. 3 months later, Victoria Romano sat in county jail, orange jumpsuit replacing designer clothes, metal bunk replacing luxury bed, rules and schedules replacing freedom and privilege. Finally understanding that in America's courts, justice is truly blind, even to senators' daughters who think they can't be touched. Her cellmate asked what she was in for. Victoria's answer showed the beginning of real understanding. For thinking I was special, for believing rules didn't apply to me, for assuming my last name made me better than everyone else. Did you learn anything? Her cellmate asked. Victoria nodded slowly. That nobody is above the law. That privilege without responsibility is just arrogance. That the people I looked down on, the officers I threatened, the judge I disrespected, they were all doing jobs that matter more than anything I've ever done. 6 months into her sentence, Victoria wrote a letter to Judge Caprio, not asking for leniency, not making excuses, just acknowledging truth. Your Honor, I was everything you said I was, entitled, arrogant, disconnected from reality. I genuinely believed that my father's position made me special, that wealth and connections exempted me from consequences, that police officers and judges were obstacles rather than protectors of justice. I destroyed government property and threatened the officers who protect our community. I claimed immunity I didn't have and invoked my father's position to escape accountability. Worst of all, I did it with such confidence that I implicated him in potential obstruction of justice. The person who walked into your courtroom doesn't exist anymore. She was broken by handcuffs and humiliation, then rebuilt by consequence and reflection. I understand now why you sentenced me so harshly, because leniency would have confirmed everything I believed, that connections matter more than accountability, that privilege protects criminals, that some people really are above the law. You proved that's not true, that America's justice system works when judges have courage to treat everyone equally. I'm sorry for what I did, sorry for who I was, and grateful that you cared enough about justice to stop me. Respectfully, Victoria Romano, inmate 03. Judge Caprio kept that letter, added it to his collection of reminders that justice works, that consequences teach, that even the most entitled person can learn humility when accountability is real and fairly applied. You've just heard at how one judge changed everything for one senator's daughter. But this story represents thousands of cases where political connections try to corrupt justice, where privilege demands special treatment, where arrogance assumes immunity from consequences. Subscribe to spread this vision of justice. Like this video if you believe nobody is above the law. Comment your city below. Let's show the world we demand accountability, regardless of political connections. Share this with someone who needs to see that privilege has limits. Victoria Romano's story reminds us that in America's courts, justice is blind to last names and political positions. That judges like Frankcaprio ensure the law applies equally to senators' daughters and struggling single mothers. That handcuffs don't care about your father's Senate seat. When Victoria said, "You can't touch me," she represented every entitled person who thinks connections exempt them from consequences. Judge Caprio's response, "Watch me," represented every American's hope that justice works regardless of privilege. This isn't just a story about one entitled woman facing consequences. It's proof that the system works when judges have integrity, when they refuse to be intimidated by political pressure, when they remember that their oath is to justice, not to power. Victoria learned the hardest lesson of her privileged life, that respect isn't given for your father's position. It's earned through character and behavior, that wealth can't buy immunity from accountability, that claiming, "You can't touch me" to a judge guarantees you'll be touched by consequences. Welcome to the movement for equal justice. Subscribe now. Victoria's story is one of thousands showing that when judges have courage, privilege means nothing and justice means everything.